George Floyd, killed before our eyes. He was killed when he should not have been. He is dead when he should be alive. He was murdered in cold blood in front of this nation. When a knee was at his neck, he said he couldn't breathe. And in his last breaths, he called out for his mama. And now he is gone. But as we know far too well, he was far from the first. The end of his life was another page in the worst chapter of our nation's history, of what it means to be Black in America 244 years into our attempts to find and to define a more perfect union. And each time this happens, we have to speak clearly. We have to say the truth. We have to stop in these moments, as painful as they are, to right the wrongs that aren't just part of our history, but that exist here in our present. Because before George Floyd felt a knee on his neck, robbing him of his breath, Eric Garner could not breathe. Because before this vile act occurred, Breonna Taylor couldn't survive a night's sleep. Ahmaud Arbery wasn't allowed to go for his daily jog. Michael Brown couldn't put his hands up, and Trayvon Martin couldn't wear a hoodie. These stories are endless, but we must find an end to them. This is our work tonight. This is our work tomorrow. This is our work for the rest of our lives. As we speak, there are Americans demonstrating in cities across the country, from our nation's capital to Minneapolis. And right here in our city, we will always stand by people's rights to express their pain and to give space to that outrage. We know how to do this, not because we're any better, but we've been through it here. In 2017, when folks were upset and wanted to protest against racism and xenophobia, against discrimination and for equal rights, we protected that right because it is the most important one we have. We know how to do this too, without violence. I've been talking for the last 2 days with community leaders, with young Angelenos, and I've asked my team to do the same thing across this city, to not only protect our spaces, to yell out, but also to take the next step forward, not just in listening, but in dialoguing and demanding what we have to collectively do as a nation to make sure this death was not in vain. I've been on the phone with my fellow mayors, including Mayors Frye and Carter in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And our gang reduction and youth development workers who specialize in keeping the peace and investing in justice across our city, I've asked them to multiply these conversations so that we have a place not just to express our sadness, but to get to work. And I want to say something to every non-African American watching tonight, that this can't be a burden, that this cannot be a discussion that just African Americans are consumed with. White and Latino and Asian and Native Americans must all own this moment, and all must join this movement. We have to bring this conversation into our homes and into our workplaces, to turn inward to address discrimination in our own communities and to unlearn it in our hearts. I share your resolve to not only declare that Black lives matter, but to make that statement real in our policies and our politics, in our policing, in our laws, and most of all, in our hearts, where all of this starts, and where one day all of this should end. We must acknowledge racism lives not just in our criminal justice system, but all around us. You're more likely to be sick, incarcerated, under or unemployed, homeless, if you're African American or in many communities of color. That's why our work is not only to demand justice for victims of police abuse, but to make community college and college affordable and free, to push for a higher minimum wage, to ensure that there is universal health care, that there is housing for people who are unhoused, lower prison populations, and more job training and placements. These are anti-racist acts. They are our weapons across decades of discrimination and centuries of segregation. I've talked in these briefings about COVID-19 about race. From the beginning, when we saw Asian businesses targeted and AAPI Angelenos, the victims of hatred and even attacks. The way that immigrants were targeted and written out of federal help because they were seen as less than human and not as Americans. And later about the way that COVID-19 infects and kills Black men and women at rates higher than any other community, together with Native Hawaiians. What we face is not new. African Americans, Latinos, most people of color have worse health outcomes, are less likely to have insurance or to see a doctor when they fall ill. And we have to see this, we have to say this, and we have to do something about it. We have to understand that reality and do what Angelenos do best. Speak from our heart and lead with love. So tonight, let us continue to demand justice, not just in Minneapolis, but across this country, and to walk with peace. It's what Breonna Taylor's mom said this morning after 7 people were shot last night in the unrest in Louisville. She said, I quote, "The last thing she'd want to see right now is any more violence." Let us honor the fallen. Let us push for justice. And let us march forward and march together.